We are going to get started right now. So thank you all for joining us and welcome to Friday, August 7th, Policy and Action Update here at MASSCreative. We've got a pretty chock-full agenda, including some guest speakers. So first, as always, we're joined by the MASSCreative team, Selassie, Sophia, Ian, Simone, and Danny. Quick note, it is Sophia's last day with us here at MASSCreative. She's been with us as an intern and then a fellow for over a year, and she has just done unbelievable work. Thank you, Sophia, for being amazing. Yay to Sophia. And Sophia wants me to remind you that we are trying to make sure that this webinar is in fact useful for you. So in the chat box, you will see a link to a 4-minute survey. We promise it is no more than 4 minutes. Please take that. You all are folks who come again and again and again. So I want to make sure, and we want to make sure that this is actually a useful, relevant tool for you. Okay, so without further ado, let's talk federal. So in the chat box, you're going to see a link to more materials on our website throughout the day. This is chock full, so I'm going to try and be really kind of top level. But basically, the HEROES Act is passed in May. That's the House version. The Senate unveils the HEALS Act last week. You can see a comparison between the two. In total, the HEROES Act is somewhere around like about $3 trillion in spending in terms of economic stimulus and recovery from the COVID-19. And then the HEALS Act is at like 1.5 trillion. So they have a ways to go in terms of getting to an agreed place. And the problem is that they are not in agreement. And all the reports we are getting is that talks are stalled. The big pressure is that Congress is supposed to go into August recess, and really important things like the Paycheck Protection Program is about to end, and then federal unemployment assistance compensation, that's that additional $600, ended last week. And so a lot of people in the nation, and specifically the Commonwealth, are now seeing a significant drop in their income, which is affecting a lot of places, including housing insecurity, etc. So there is more to come, but we are not really hopeful that we're going to see movement on this very quickly, unfortunately. In the chat box, you'll see that we've included an action you can take to urge our members of Congress to support provisions that'll help arts and culture. So I want to talk about the state. Not great news here either. New COVID cases continue to be reported, and that is not good. We are still in phase 3, step 1, and with those increases in cases, it's very unlikely we're going to move to step 2 anytime soon, and that's a real concern. What's more concerning is we could in fact go backwards. So Baker last week unveiled the Mask Up MA campaign. You'll see in this photo is our congressional members, our Massachusetts delegation in the cover of their album. I would encourage you all in your organizations to incorporate the Mask Up MA campaign into your social media. Our industries need cases to go down and for public health guidelines to be met in order for us to be able to reopen safely. So this benefits us and our communities and their health. So the other big thing that happened last week, you got so many emails from me. I am so sorry, but you got a lot of emails about the economic development bill because they were hurrying to finish that up. And then at the end of last week, the legislature decided to do something that they haven't done since before the 90s, which is to extend the formal session. So this little chart tells you what you should expect in our traditional normal 2-year legislative cycle. So it starts January of year 1 and it ends officially in December of year 2. You see on those two red arrows, those are big places where we're paying attention and where the legislature is doing the bulk of their work. And then they go in after the 31st, they go into informal session, which the general business happens, but not a lot of things are moving after that point. So because they got to the 31st and there was a crush of legislation, there's still uncertainty around revenue projections, the legislature decided to do something wild, which is they extended the formal session, and they extended it officially until the end of the whole legislative session, which is December. They also passed a 3-month level funding bill, state funding bill, that'll get us through the end of October, and the Baker signed that. That means that it's just to keep the doors open for government. It means that things like the Massachusetts Cultural Council's annual budget is still in limbo, and the grant programs that we are all counting on to do our regular regular business, let alone recovery, still haven't been authorized. So the real prevailing wisdom is that they're going to take a little bit of pause and move into informal sessions in August, but then they're going to pick up really heavily in September. And just brace yourselves, folks. You're gonna get a lot more emails and a lot more communication from us and our partners and our stakeholders, encouraging you to take action on different bills as they come up. So I want to talk about the bill that we were really pressing hard on last week, which is the economic development bond bill. Again, a bond bill, different than like a budget bill. You have to raise the money in a bond bill in order to spend the money. And the legislature only authorizes Baker as to what he can spend the money on. Baker and the administration can still say, we're not going to spend the money. So this is like step 2 of a 3-part process. The House and the Senate have their 2 versions. You can see the differences. Highlight is $31 million combined for relief for arts and culture, including artists. Artists were actually called out in this bill specifically, which I think is a really important point to make. But now those 2 versions have to be put together and negotiated into one final version. On our website, you'll see a really good article that kind of takes you through that process. And there's an action you can take to reach out to your legislators and urge them to retain all the provisions that are going to help the creative community in that bond bill. Then the next thing we're going to have to do is later on, once it's passed, is we're going to have to mount a campaign to make sure that the Baker administration actually does release and make plans to spend all of that money that was authorized for the creative sector. And don't worry, we are there. We are going to share that information, and we're going to all do this together. The other thing I just want to briefly say is that right now you can write your legislator about the bond bill. The other thing is spend some time in August and think about how you're going to build a plan for building your relationship with your elected officials from now until, frankly, the end of the the calendar year. We need to make sure that elected officials are hearing from us regularly and not just when we need something, right? We have incredible stories to share about the impact we're having in communities and the things that matter. And so share those stories, make sure that your legislators know you're around and that you are caring for the communities that they serve too, okay? So now I'm going to turn it over to Simone, who is going to talk to us about our first part of Create the Vote. And then we're going to be joined by Jay Cottle, who is Executive Director of Dynamis, and he's also the Young Civic Leaders Coordinator for MassVote, as well as Don Schaefer, who is a co-founder of Massachusetts Artist Leaders Coalition and a member of their steering committee. Jay and Don sit on the steering committee for Create the Vote, but Simone, take it away.
Thanks, Emily, and I apologize if there's any background noise. So one part of the Create the Vote campaign we've been doing is Create the Count, so census advocacy, and we're revamping that again this month because actually the deadline to fill out the census has been moved up to September 30th, which is a month sooner than it was going to be, so needs to be a huge push to get everyone counted. The census is wildly important, not only to have an understanding of who lives here and who we are as a state and a country, but because it determines federal funding to things like roads, so transportation, hospitals, schools, and that's just to name a few programs. It also determines state legislative districts and congressional representation, the data is used to draw congressional districts. So it's completely within the realm of possibility that states like Massachusetts could lose or gain a congressional representative, which is huge. The data is also used to make decisions for the next 10 years. So we really want to make sure it's accurate and that all of our communities are counted. There's understandably apprehension about telling the federal government where you live and who you are. So we have a toolkit on our website to post on social media, to share with your friends, but it's really important to stress that there's no citizenship question. Everyone who lives here should and is able to get counted. It's very easy to take the census. You can take it online or over the phone in 13 languages, and then there's 50 other language guides to take it by mail. You can also check the response rate for your county. So that's what we have a few of these up on the screen. We will be sending out more resources to push for everyone to take the census, but we also would like everyone to engage in that action. There's, as I said, lots of resources on our website, and this is hugely important. We got to get it done by September 30th. So I'm going to let Jay talk about some mail-in voting.
Good morning, everyone. So there are a couple different ways that you can be voting in this particular election in light of COVID-19. Specifically, voting by mail has been expanded. So by now, everyone should have received in the mail an actual application to receive a ballot. So it's kind of broken up into two steps. Everyone receives an application. You fill out the application for a ballot, and then they'll actually send you a ballot, and then you send the ballot back. Both of those mailings are prepaid in terms of postage, so they're free for everybody, but it's clear to note that where you receive the application is based on where you are registered to vote in the state of Massachusetts. What's great is if you're quarantining someplace else, after you get that application, you can actually mark on the application where you want your ballot to be mailed. That means that it does not have to come back to that same place. So wherever you want it to be mailed afterwards, that can happen. Now, some people are worried about the safety and security of vote by mail, and there are a couple different things to do in regards to that. One, and this is right in the chat now, you can actually track your ballot. So if you're worried about where it is, if you're worried about if it makes it or not, a portal was created from the Secretary of State that will help monitor where your ballot is. The other thing you can do is you're receiving an actual ballot. And so if you want to fill that ballot out, but actually deposit it yourself on election day or during early voting, you can do that as well, which is a good segue to early voting. So early voting in the primary, for the primary, is the 22nd of August to the 28th. I'm putting some of these dates in the chat in a moment. And how it works is that your polling location is typically determined by your address, where you're registered to vote. For early voting, that's expanded, and there are different sites set up across the city that allow you to vote anywhere. And usually it includes City Hall as well. It's important to note that some of these dates shift, and these locations obviously are dependent on city by city. So not every city has the same time and the same window. A couple other important dates. Your vote by mail needs to, the last day that you can request a vote by mail ballot is the 26th of August. But if you're advocating for anything, please don't tell anyone that date because they're gonna wait. It's gonna be too long, it's too short. As soon as you get that application, send it right back out. And if you have not received an application yet, you can actually request one at the Secretary of State's website as well. So that's how you can get that there. Anything else? So that's early voting. That is vote by mail. I think that's just about it. So, the voter registration deadline, if you have not already registered to vote and thus have not received an application, the deadline has actually been condensed. Usually it's about 20 days before an election. This year it's the 22nd of August. So folks can actually register a little bit later in advance. And if you register by the 22nd, you can vote in the September election, so September 1st. That window has been significantly reduced. So if you know anyone who is not registered, make sure that they get in there and make sure that they get that done. And you can also update your address if where you've registered before is not where you are now. And then,
okay, that's very good. I'd like to add that you can also download the ballot application and send it in rather than wait for a new one to be mailed to you. And also, if you run out of time, if you get your ballot application and you don't think it will be mailed in time, you can actually drop off your ballot at your local election office. So
I'm seeing some questions in the chat that are really great. Not everyone has received a ballot. So if you've already filled out your application but have not received a ballot, those ballots are actually supposed to be going out this week and next week. So they're on their way to you if you filled them out. Also, if you've requested a mail-in ballot but changed your mind, that's perfectly fine. You can only vote one way per election. And so when the vote by mail piece is done, that means that you filled out the ballot and sent it back. Once you've done that, you can no longer vote in another way within that specific election. So you can change your mind. However, if you want to vote by mail in September, but then come November, you want to vote in person, that's fine too. So it can be two different ways over two elections, but only one way in one election, and vote by mail is not final until your ballot is in. So you can always change your mind there.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Simone. That is fantastic. And the other thing, right, is that we are working to make sure that the creative community is standing up and being a part of strengthening democracy by encouraging voter participation, education, and turnout. So don't keep this information to yourself. Share it with your friends and your neighbors and your audiences and your communities. In the chat box, you should see a link to a pledge to create the vote. If you haven't already, we would really love to have you join us in that partnership. If I may, I'm going to just take the executive privilege and loop back to actually something around the federal issue, because I think it's important to lift this up. So the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce actually led a national effort to get chambers of commerce across the nation to sign a letter to congressional leadership in support of provisions that would protect and relieve the arts and cultural sector, actually specifically the museum sector. In light of COVID-19. That kind of cross-sector partnership and support is incredibly meaningful. We all know what the impacts are for arts and culture to our communities, but to have the business communities across the nation stand up and say that too is really, really important. In the chat box, we'll also include this in our follow-up recap email. You'll see a list of all of the Massachusetts chambers who signed on to that letter. If you have a relationship with those chambers, it's a great idea to thank them for that work. This is how we're going to do this, is when we join together and support each other. There are so many other legislative updates that we weren't able to fit into this, this weekly update, but I promise you they are on our website. We will include them in the recap. I'm so glad to have our guests on. And Jay, thank you again. Sophia is going to just tell me again to make sure that everyone fills out that survey so we can make sure we're providing you all with the most useful resources and tools. Have a great day. Have a good weekend. I hope you get outside, and we will see you in 2 weeks on Friday, August 21st. Ian, that's correct. It's the 21st, right? I got that date right?
Yep.
All right. Thanks all. Have a good day. Bye now.